Brandon loved riding motorcycles more than anything in the world and dreamed of becoming a good father to his son. Unfortunately, both turned against him. In a family life where the husband is satisfied with his wife and the wife with her husband, happiness will undoubtedly continue. Brandon Duran and Amber Andrews were perfect for each other, but it turned out that each had their own understanding of family life. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. On June 24, 1980, a son named Brandon was born to Cynthia and Mark Duran. Soon after, the boy's parents divorced, agreeing on joint custody of their son. Brandon spent his childhood traveling between New Mexico, where he lived with his father, and San Diego, where his mother, stepfather, and younger brother Garrett had settled. In elementary school, Brandon was not very bright, but was a calm and sweet child. He was not one of those who craved being in the spotlight, but everything changed when the boy grew up. Brandon turned into a wild, fearless teenager who listened to heavy rock, dressed to attract attention, and was ready to defend his opinion with his fists if necessary. Garrett, who was 5 years younger than Brandon, respected his older brother and wanted to be like him in every way. Despite living in different cities, the guys remained friends throughout their lives. Garrett described his brother as a natural leader and admired his human qualities. In addition, Brandon was a very good snowboarder and dreamed of becoming a professional athlete. To achieve his goal, at 18, he moved permanently to San Diego. Duran's father was an avid motorcyclist and at one time was a member of the Bandidos motorcycle club, which the FBI considered a criminal organization. The childhood spent in his father's company and surrounded by other bikers influenced Brandon's passion for motorcycles. They often spent time in the garage, where the father disassembled his iron horse, repaired it, and then taught his son to assemble the motorcycle back. Brandon liked living with his father, but sometimes he still missed his mom and brother. For himself, the guy decided that he would find the one and only who would live in love and harmony for life. Duran did not want his children to be torn between two parents either. Unfortunately, in 2005, Brandon's father, Mark, unexpectedly died from a blood disease. The man simply went to the hospital for a liver biopsy. The doctors immediately noticed something wrong. The life of Duran Sr. ended suddenly. No one expected such an outcome. The death of his father hit the older son the hardest. This tragic event became a turning point in Brandon's fate, who was very attached to his father. The death of his parent literally emptied the young man. Brandon fell into a deep depression, stopped snowboarding, and abandoned all his previously favorite activities. With his father's departure, it was as if he had lost a part of himself. It was Mark who taught him to make things from metal, and now Brandon handmade an urn for his father's ashes, which he kept at home. Still unable to come to terms with the sudden loss of a loved one, Brandon decided that California was no longer for him. He packed his things and went to Las Vegas, Nevada, where many of his father's friends lived. Being close to the members of the local Bandidos chapter, who knew the deceased better than others, Brandon found comfort. Duran got a job in construction, spent his free time with new buddies, and delved deeper into the biker life. His most valuable acquisition was a Flyride Chopper motorcycle with his name embroidered on the seat. It was from his father that Duran inherited his love for motorcycles. Despite his menacing appearance and biker attributes, Brandon radiated kind positivity. He never became a full member of Bandidos because he dreamed of a completely different life, but he managed to maintain good relations with his father's friends. One day in Vegas, at one of the biker events, Brandon Duran met 24-year-old tattoo artist Amber Andrews. The guy was crazy about Amber, a mysterious and uninhibited young woman. The bright brunette with red lipstick on her lips embodied all his masculine dreams. Deep down, Duran believed that his father had sent Amber into his life to pull him out of depression and give him a push toward new achievements. Brandon was a hopeless romantic. He didn't want dates or meaningless relationships. He was immediately looking for a life partner. Brandon Duran and Amber Andrews were an unusual couple, but they were perfect for each other. And 2 months later, the young people got married. June 6, 2006, choosing this date because of its numerical value. 3 sixes are a popular symbol in biker and rock culture. A biker patch with 3 sixes has no religious connotation. The number 666 in this case is the abbreviation FFF expressed in numbers, meaning Friends Forever Friends. The wedding took place in a small chapel in Vegas. The dressed-up Brandon, his friends, and his family stood in the parking lot when a white limousine pulled up, and Amber stepped out in a black wedding dress that she had sewn herself. During the ceremony, as expected, the bride and groom vowed to love each other in sorrow and in joy, in wealth and in poverty, in sickness and in health, until death do them part. Brandon's best man was his younger brother Garrett. In Brandon's family, Amber immediately seemed a bit strange, as if tired of life. Mother Cynthia whispered that in a black dress, the bride looked more like a black widow. She seemed to immediately sense a threat in this unusual girl. But Brandon stood up for his chosen one and explained to his mother that he was concerned with the woman, not what she was wearing. Moreover, Amber was pregnant. Brandon loved his father, so he was very excited about soon becoming a dad himself. 6 months after the wedding, on December 15, 2006, the couple, surrounded by family, welcomed their firstborn. The boy was named Brando Marcos Duran, almost like Brandon and Mark Duran. The birth of a child always brings changes to the usual routine of young parents, and not everyone is ready for these changes. Amber, it seemed, had a much harder time than Brandon. She had particular difficulty taking on the role of a mother. The couple decided that Amber would quit her job and become a housewife, since the infant needed constant care and attention. So now Brandon had to put in maximum effort to provide his family with a roof over their heads and fill the refrigerator with food. It was during this period that difficulties appeared in the spouse's relationship. Amber had always been a party girl, and caring for her young son forced her to stay home alone because her husband was constantly working. The feeling of isolation tormented the young mother so much that as soon as she finished breastfeeding the baby and could afford to leave the house, Amber took full advantage of the opportunity. She started meeting with girlfriends again, partying and drinking. The woman began leaving the house more often. She left the son with Brandon when he came home from work or hired a nanny. Of course, Duran also loved parties and could drink a little to relax, but he knew his limits because he was now the father of little Brando. But Amber let loose completely. Not only did she often come home drunk, but one day her husband noticed that her pupils were dilated, and her behavior had sharply changed for the worse. Most likely, the woman was not limited to alcohol. It got to the point where Amber would leave during the day on errands and return only late at night. Sometimes she was wearing different clothes for some reason, or her hair was wet, as if she had showered somewhere. When her husband asked her questions about this, Amber got very angry and refused to talk altogether. At that time, Brandon's younger brother Garrett was living in the house with them along with his wife. They had specifically come to Las Vegas for a while to help with the baby, so they often became unwilling witnesses to scandals in the house. Brandon didn't like that his wife was always going somewhere. Because of this, they often argued, and one day the argument ended in a fight, and the police had to be called. Enraged by her husband's claims, Amber grabbed the urn with Brandon's father's ashes, the urn he had made with his own hands and carefully kept, ran out into the street and threw it on the ground in the yard, scattering the ashes. The arriving police somehow calmed the spouses and insisted that the woman pack her things and leave the house for a while to give Brandon a chance to calm down. That same night, Amber left and returned only a week later. Despite all the madness, Brandon forgave his wife. He always forgave her because he wanted the best life for his son, wanted his child to have a happy childhood surrounded by loving parents. Moreover, he himself still loved Amber and didn't want to part with her. no matter how toxic a person she was. For some time after the reconciliation, everything was fine in the house. Amber promised Brandon to spend more time with her family and forget about night parties. She cooked meals, played with the child, and met her husband from work, but her enthusiasm didn't last long. Very soon, the woman forgot her promises and went all out again. Amber belonged to the type of people who are ready to say anything, everything you want to hear, just to keep you in their life. The arguments resumed, but now they were less loud. Brandon simply didn't want to show all this negativity to his family. He often walked around with bruises, and relatives guessed how the marks appeared on his body. However, Brandon endured as long as he could. Finally, the relationship between the spouses reached a critical point, and after 4 years of marriage in 2010, the couple filed for divorce. They agreed on joint custody of Brando, and the child spent a week with his mother and a week with his father. Of course, Brandon would have liked to take his son for himself, but he perfectly understood that the boy needed a mother. Nevertheless, the man tried to get the most out of the time they spent together with his son. Their weeks were filled with laughter, fun, and love. Brandon loved his boy very much and was ready to do anything to make his childhood happy and carefree. One day, arriving with his mother Cynthia at Amber's house to pick up his son, Brandon encountered a locked door. No one answered the knock. When the man used the keys he kept just in case and went inside. Judging by the absence of things, Amber had taken the son and disappeared without warning her ex-husband. She simply took the child and moved to Oklahoma without saying a word to her ex-husband. Brandon got in the car and, together with relatives, set off on a 24-hour trip to Oklahoma to find his son. They learned that Amber and her son had settled with her new boyfriend named Justin. However, disappointment awaited Brandon there too. No one was home, although Amber's car was in the driveway, or they simply didn't open the door. They waited for 9 hours, but no one appeared. However, as soon as Brandon left for half an hour to a cafe to grab a bite, his ex-wife's car disappeared from the driveway. The man had no choice but to call the Oklahoma police to help him get Brando back. But the police couldn't do anything either. They advised him to contact a lawyer to resolve the custody issue, which Brandon did. In the end, he filed a missing person report for his son, and the next day, Amber contacted him herself and promised to personally bring Brando to his father. By court decision, Brandon received full custody of his son, since it turned out that the mother had kidnapped the child and transported him across state lines. The judge considered Amber an unfit mother and did not allow her to see the boy. Brandon and Brando returned to San Diego, where his family lived, to start over and simply get their life in order. He raised his son with love and faith in the best, taught him to snowboard, told him about motorcycles and music, and for some time, everything really went well. Now little Brando had a stable home, a caring father, and loved ones nearby. Father and son lived alone for the entire year of 2011 and heard nothing about Amber at all. But in 2012, Amber contacted Brandon, said she loved him, that she wanted to try to fix everything. She finally admitted that she had behaved wrongly. Then the woman came to San Diego and said she wanted to give their marriage a second chance. Wanting to get his family back, Duran agreed to leave the past behind. He wanted his son to have a full, strong family, for Brando to have a mother nearby, and for him to have his beloved woman. Of course, after parting with Amber, Brandon dated other girls, but none of them made him feel what he felt next to his ex-wife. In the summer of 2012, Amber returned to reunite with Brandon. His family was not thrilled with the news, but they had to come to terms with it. The man believed in the best, believed that his ex-wife had changed. How cruelly he was mistaken. Brandon and Amber planned to settle together in San Diego. Brando was supposed to go to kindergarten, and before the start of the school year, they went together to pick up things from Oklahoma. The spouses took a truck, put Brandon's motorcycle in the bed, and set off on the trip. They were supposed to be gone for just a week. But Brandon Duran never returned. His dreams of a happy family life were shattered. On August 8, 2012, a man named Van Emblem contacted the sheriff's office in southern Oklahoma and reported that the previous evening he had helped a friend get rid of a dead body. The police granted the witness immunity in exchange for him telling all the details of the incident, and here's what Van Emblem told the detectives. The previous evening, on August 7, 2012, his childhood friend Justin Hammer called him and said he needed help loading and that he had just shot someone. At first, Emblem thought it was some stupid joke, so he said he'd do whatever was necessary without issue. But when Van arrived at Justin's house and saw numerous buckets and streams of blood around them, he realized his friend wasn't joking but was serious. In Hammer's house, there were several 5-gallon paint buckets filled with cement and dismembered human remains. Despite the buckets being closed, blood was seeping through the lids and flowing down the sides. Van Emblem got scared. If Justin had really killed someone, he could do the same to him. The man didn't show that he was afraid. He simply helped his friend load these buckets with their horrific contents into the truck bed. Then he hastily said goodbye, jumped into his car, and immediately contacted a lawyer because it dawned on him that he had become an unwitting accomplice to the crime. The lawyer advised him to go to the police and tell everything. Justin Hammer was arrested that same evening. The man didn't deny it and immediately confessed to everything. He told the police that he had indeed shot a person, but it was done in self-defense. The guy broke into his house and started threatening. The frightened Justin grabbed a gun and pulled the trigger. When he realized what he had done, he panicked, but instead of calling the police right away, he decided to get rid of the uninvited guest. Hammer cut the dead body into parts, put them in buckets, poured cement over them, and threw them into a pond on his property. To verify Justin's story, the authorities had to drain the pond. The first thing they saw at the bottom was a dog crate containing a human torso wrapped in tarp. Continuing the search, specialists found 5 plastic buckets with other body parts poured with cement. The body had been cut into 25 pieces, and in life, it belonged to 32-year-old Brandon Duran. He had to be identified by his tattoos. The officers called Brandon's family in California and reported what had happened. Initially, Mother Cynthia picked up the phone, but she couldn't finish the conversation. The woman dropped the phone from her hands. A sharp pain pierced her heart. It seemed that her son's life was just starting to get better, and suddenly, such a tragedy struck. The mother was unable to comprehend what was happening. She was crushed by grief. It was good that her younger son Garrett was with her at that moment. When the initial shock passed, the family called Amber to find out what had happened, but the ex-wife was not aware of what was going on. According to her, everything was fine. On August 7, 2012, she and Brandon went to a doctor's appointment together. On the way during the conversation, Amber casually mentioned the name of her boyfriend, Justin Hammer, with whom she lived in Oklahoma, and this infuriated Duran. Usually calm, Brandon got incredibly angry because of this conversation, stopped the truck, pulled his motorcycle out of the bed, got on it, and saying he would deal with the situation himself, rode off, leaving his wife alone on the road. That was the last time Amber saw him. The police tracked down Amber at her mother's house in Oklahoma and now officially informed her of Brandon's death. She seemed shocked by the news and very upset. The woman told the authorities that reconciling with her ex-husband was complicated by the fact that she had not ended her official relationship with Justin Hammer. Amber claimed that the day before, she had argued about this with Brandon, after which he rode off on his motorcycle to talk to Hammer face-to-face. She didn't know what happened next, so the subsequent events became known from Justin's account. He was at home doing everyday chores when suddenly the front door burst open with a bang, and Brandon Duran walked in. The uninvited guest stated that Amber had returned to him and advised Hammer to stay away from her, otherwise someone would get hurt. Not expecting the sudden intrusion, Justin feared that Amber's ex-husband would harm him. He had heard from his girlfriend more than once about her husband's aggressive and hot-tempered nature. Hammer rushed to the gun safe, pulled out a shotgun and a pistol, and shot Brandon in the head. With both weapons simultaneously, Duran fell dead. When Justin realized what he had done, he panicked and decided to get rid of Brandon's body. He did this in his own bathroom using a hacksaw. Then, laying out the remains in buckets, he filled the containers with cement to add weight. With the help of his childhood friend Van Emblem, Justin loaded the buckets into the car and dumped them into a pond on his property in Elmore City, Oklahoma. The cleaning products he used to cover up the traces of the crime and the victim's clothing, the man burned in a metal barrel, and Duran's motorcycle was later given to a relative who disassembled it for parts. By the way, when the police later found the shotgun and pistol in the gun safe, Brandon's blood was still on them. In August 2012, Justin Hammer was formally charged with first-degree murder. The trial began 2 years later, in July 2014. In his testimony, Justin portrayed Brandon as a cruel biker criminal who broke into his house and threatened him with violence over his relationship with Amber. Hammer claimed that he genuinely feared his girlfriend's ex-husband because he believed him to be a member of the criminal Bandidos group. The investigators even contacted Duran's family just in case, and they made it clear that Brandon was never a member of the Bandidos motorcycle club and never even tried to join it. After his father's death, he communicated with his friends for a while, but after getting married, the communication faded. Although Hammer's claims that he was afraid of bikers were baseless, the man continued to insist that it was just self-defense. But the prosecution team understood perfectly well that the attack was premeditated. The thing is, during the search of Hammer's house, the police found several very interesting items. Hidden deep in the gun safe filled with various ammunition, pistols, and rifles was a piece of paper. It was handwritten and listed items such as a hacksaw, meat grinder, pepper spray, 5-gallon plastic buckets, tarp, bleach, carpet cleaner, ammonia, and a change of clothes. Essentially, it was a list of items for a planned crime. The police also found security camera footage showing Justin buying items from this list the day before the murder. And before that, in a conversation with his friends, the man mentioned a potential crime he might commit. Hammer told his buddies that he would try to avoid punishment by blaming it all on self-defense, so there could be no talk of any accident. The court found Justin Hammer guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. It sounds like the end of the story, but there was more to it. Although Justin claimed that he acted alone and no one else was involved, some facts indicated that at least 2 people were involved in the case. According to Hammer, he fired from 2 weapons simultaneously. His story might have been believable if not for the direction of the shots. They were fired from different points. The autopsy showed that Brandon Duran was shot 3 times in the back of the head with a small caliber pistol, and then finished off with a shotgun blast to the face. Blood spatter showed that more than one person was shooting. The police immediately suspected that a woman was involved. Even without considering the 2 different types of gunshot wounds, the list of items needed for the crime, judging by the handwriting, was clearly written by a woman's hand. In the end, the examination showed that the handwritten list, hidden in Hammer's gun safe, was written in Amber's handwriting, Brandon's ex-wife. This pointed to her involvement in the crime. All this time while the investigation was ongoing, Amber Andrews was free and even managed to give birth to another child, whose father she claimed was Justin Hammer. For some time, it was thought that it might be Brandon's child due to their reconciliation. But it turned out that neither Hammer nor Duran had anything to do with the baby. Andrews became pregnant by a completely different man. It seems this woman didn't waste time and wasn't particularly grieving over her ex-husband's death. So the police thoroughly examined Amber's alibi, starting with a conversation with a girl named Erin, who was babysitting Brando while his parents went to the doctor's appointment. Erin confirmed that Amber and Brandon left in their truck with the motorcycle tied in the bed. Then around 11 p.m., Amber returned home alone without her husband and was very upset. She explained that her husband had left her in the car in some remote area, and he rode off on the motorcycle to Justin Hammer's house. It seemed to match, But there was one detail that ruined the whole story. Brandon's motorcycle was not running. It turned out that it simply didn't work. Duran took it with him to fix it while Amber was visiting her family. This contradicted the woman's claims that after the argument, her ex-husband got on it and rode away. In addition, Aaron told the police that that day Amber mistakenly took her cell phone instead of her own. It could have been an accident, or it could have been done on purpose because if Amber was lying, she knew the police would definitely track her mobile, so she left her phone and took the nanny's phone. However, Amber didn't consider that the detectives could track Aaron's cell phone just the same. It turned out that just before 5 p.m., the nanny's phone, which Amber had, pinged in the area of Justin Hammer's house. The call was picked up by a tower in that area. Then the mobile was immediately turned off and not turned on until 9 p.m. It was during these 4 hours, as the police believe, that Brandon Duran was shot. In Amber's own phone, investigators found one text message from Hammer sent at 3 p.m. "Ink? Ready," Justin wrote, apparently hinting that everything was ready for the attack. All that was left was to bring Brandon. It turns out that Duran's death was definitely not accidental. The crime was planned in advance. Amber, as she herself admitted, was still in a relationship with Justin. Her desire to reunite with her ex-husband was nothing more than part of the plan. The woman wanted to lure her husband, who had taken her child, to Oklahoma to set up an ambush and send him to the next world. Andrews' friends told investigators that she was planning to return to Brandon. According to them, Amber deliberately told her new boyfriend stories about her cruel ex-husband. She complained that he had taken her son and forbidden her even to see the child. Amber did everything to make Hammer want to rid his beloved woman of her aggressive ex-husband himself. And blinded by feelings, Justin easily fell for the tricks he hid Amber's involvement in the crime, until the end. In September 2015, Amber Andrews was arrested. She was charged with first-degree murder, but in the end, she was released on bail, which incredibly upset Brandon's family. 2 years later, in April 2017, Amber's trial began. This woman behaved as if she had nothing to do with the murder of her ex-husband. She smiled friendly at the public, waved her hand, looked openly and confidently into the cameras of photographers and media, and chatted about meaningless topics with acquaintances. With her whole appearance, Amber clearly wanted to make it clear that she was not prone to violence and incapable of harming anyone. But witness testimonies and phone call recordings confirmed that she was at the crime scene at the time when Brandon Duran was shot. Amber insisted on her innocence and did not plead guilty, but the jury thought otherwise. So what, according to the police, happened that day? On August 7, 2012, Amber, under some pretext, drove Brandon to Justin Hammer's house. Duran hardly suspected that his ex-wife was sending him to certain death. When the husband and wife were inside the house, Amber, standing behind Brandon, shot him 3 times in the head with a pistol, and then Justin finished him off with a shotgun blast. Making sure Duran was dead, the lovers stuffed the body into a large trash bag to reduce blood and dragged it to the bathroom, where they dismembered it into 25 parts together and threw the remains into plastic buckets, pouring cement over them. After dealing with the body, Amber left to make it back to the nanny for the child and create an alibi for herself. And Justin called his childhood friend Van Emblem to help with cleanup and disposal of the remains. When the buckets were at the bottom of the pond, Justin collected the deceased Brandon's clothes, his personal belongings, bottles of cleaning products he used to clean the crime scene, put it all in a metal barrel, and burned it. Hammer gave Brandon's motorcycle, on which he supposedly arrived, for parts. The conspirators didn't even think to check if it was running when making up their false story. The motive for the crime was the custody battle. Amber was very angry at her husband for taking her son. She didn't just want to get Brando back, but also to take revenge on Brandon. The woman took her ex-husband's life because he fully controlled the situation. Amber could no longer get her way through the court or any other means, so to get Brando, she went to extreme measures. Amber Marie Andrews was found guilty after just 5 hours of deliberation. She was given the maximum sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the charge of first-degree murder and an additional 17 years for conspiracy to commit the murder and desecration of Brandon Duran's body. Amber tried to appeal the decision, but the Oklahoma Court of Appeals upheld the sentence, and most likely, the criminal will remain in prison for the rest of her days. This means that no other man will suffer from Amber Andrews' cunning. Unfortunately, little Brando lost both parents. First, he was placed in a children's shelter, then handed over to a foster family in Oklahoma. Brandon's family went through a lot of formalities to take the child, and in the end, custody of the boy was given to his grandmother Cynthia, the mother of the deceased Brandon. Cynthia said that Brando remembers and loves his dad, and she, in turn, does everything to ensure the child doesn't forget him. Looking at Brando, she often thinks of her son, whose life was so senselessly cut short due to his ex-wife's treachery. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.